is Kevin Murphy from Riff Tracks and Mystery Science Theater 3000, and you are listening to Dispatch Radio.
Well, I have Casey La Scala on the phone with me, and it's a great chance to talk about a film that's coming up. It's called The Remaining, and I'm going to jump right to it because I really want Casey to kind of help describe the film because it's a very interesting concept dealing with the Rapture, but it's described as a bit of a thriller with maybe some horror and sci-fi sort of aspects to it as well as how it's being presented. So, Casey, how are you?
I'm doing really well.
Tell everybody a little bit about The Remaining and what they're going to expect to see.
Well, it's a, it started out kind of as a found footage, first person shooter, meaning that it was like going to be cut through the POV of our protagonist and his experience on the end of the world, and it kind of turned into more of a traditional, cinematic narrative where it's a story of these 5 best friends that are enjoying a wedding of 2 of them and having the best day of their life when the biblical end of the world happens, and it starts with the rapture. So the rapture happens at their wedding, and then from then on they experience all the trumpets and all the woes, and they're running for their lives trying to find safety, try to find answers, and trying to find redemption in their own lives. And so what you're going to see is, it's really kind of, it starts out a disaster film with hail and airplanes falling from the sky, and they're just trying to reach cover and safety, and then it kind of changes into more of a paranormal activity where they realize that there's more of a supernatural situation happening on Earth with demons now that have been released from the bottomless pit that are after everyone, they're after to torment everyone on the planet.
Wow.
So they have to figure out how to escape and survive all that.
So it sounds, obviously there's a lot of biblical themes here. Is this a film that is still family friendly? I know it's been picked up by Affirm Pictures. It comes out September 5th, folks. Is it something that still is friendly enough for kids, or where are we at here with an age 13? Where do you think it lies for folks?
Yeah, it's a PG-13, so it never it's not, we don't have any gratuitous violence or any kind of, it's not a slasher film. It has, some dramatic situations, but, it's PG-13, and, a lot of it, I think it really is for families because I think you'll be surprised that it has such a very kind of character-driven tone. It doesn't have your typical, we're constantly running into closets and hiding and the boogeyman's outside. I think there's a lot of, aspects of the film that deal with the relationships of the characters that I think would appeal to younger audiences. And I think when we get to, those kind of harder-hitting, scary moments, I don't think they're so scary that they're going to, really, scare too much the younger crowd.
Well, I love the idea of taking a different spin on the Rapture, a different spin on end times, and obviously some different films are dabbling in this arena. We have a Left Behind reboot that's coming out here soon with Vic Armstrong directing Nicolas Cage and company and stuff like that, but yours sounds even more edgier than that, right? So more of, you already talked about the point of view, so you have more of that, chronicle scenes where it's the point of view with them turn on the camera on themselves, but also just the fire and brimstone coming down from the heavens, man. We got some pretty dark scenes coming.
Yeah, I think it's what I want to do is make it, with that whole single shooter with using a character who has a handheld camera. I wanted to try to make it as real as possible, like if this really would take place. And there's different interpretations of the Rapture, obviously. I believe in the Left Behind Rapture, it's like clothes are left behind that you just vanish. In my version, I kind of wanted to make it a little bit more relatable, a little more real, that the body stays, which is the vessel, and that the soul leaves. So really the only indication that someone's been raptured in my film is the eyes, they will get white and cloudy. That's the kind of indications. The bodies are falling everywhere. So starting from there, I think for me that was the biggest hurdle. I wanted to make sure that it was relatable and that you could kind of wrap your head around what the rapture would kind of look like. Is it like a virus? Is it something that we can kind of sink our teeth into? So I think in that sense, by connecting it and making it real, it gets a little scarier.
Well, I think definitely, and it definitely comes through on the trailer. Folks will link to the trailer so you can catch the latest one, and it definitely has that. It's not a horror film, but at least it has that tensions and that anxiety that some of the horror films bring to the genre, and it's great to see that happen in the faith-based community. I mean, you're not the only one that is starting to go down this road. It's great to see Affirm Pictures get behind you and say, listen, Christians can enjoy shockers and thrillers just like everybody else. It doesn't have to be inappropriate to do so, and that's great to hear, Casey.
Yeah, and that's it's funny because I did a film. My first experience kind of working within the framework of this audience and kind of embracing the faith-based community was on A Walk to Remember. I don't know if you ever remember that film.
Absolutely,
but that was something that had really some kind of really, really interesting themes. And when you see this film, you'll see a lot of those themes are present in the remaining, even though this is a supernatural thriller. You'll notice a tone. There's a definite tone to this that you go, how does the guy who produced A Walk to Remember do The Remaining, which is a supernatural thriller? Well, I think you start with characters and those relationships, and I think by starting with them and building a story around them, you have a very similar tone. And I think, and interesting enough, I was really excited that Affirm would take a chance with this because it is a mainstream film, but it has very, 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 very faith-based themes running through it that don't hit you over the head. They don't hit you over the head. So I think that for me, I was really trying to find a way to tell this story in a very real way and a cinematic way, but also get the audience to think about stuff, think about their lives, think about where they are, think about where they need to be, what choices they've made. And I think predominantly in a lot of these supernatural thrillers or horror films, they don't really get there. I mean, I think you kind of run for your life and you get killed and you that's it. You don't really understand who the characters are. I mean, even the Paranormal Activity films or the Insidiouses, you don't really understand the characters too much. You don't really understand where they are regarding faith. And this film really examines this, and I think that's the strength of it. While having this very big cinematic scope to it. And that's what that's what I think. It's almost creating a new genre, and I'm hoping that the film's embraced because I have another one behind it that I want to do. So we'll see.
Well, that's great to hear. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you too, because I want to piggyback off this question, and that is, do you consider yourself a Bible believing Christian?
Yes, I was confirmed in the Lutheran Church, and I went to St. Paul's Lutheran Church when I was a kid. And I go to Bella Presbyterian up here, up where I live, and this story, in fact, kind of came to me. The seed was planted when I was going to church camp.
Wow!
And it came from, and if you want to say, well, how did you come up with this idea? I mean, it was two things. It was going to church camp and really understanding and learning about the tribulation. And we talked about it. Everyone had different interpretations of it, but as a child, it really struck me. It's like, wow, that's really, I really got to think about, what's my relationship with God, and I really got to think about things and my choices I make and the people that I love. And that really, as a child, really kind of stayed with me, right? And then when I loved Stephen King books, okay? When I was a kid, I loved this kind of stuff. And there was a book, I don't know if you ever read The Stand.
Oh, of course.
The Stand has a lot of religious undertones. I mean, it's not even
like I said, they're not even undertones, brother. They're straightforward in your face.
They're straightforward in your face. So, I've always found, in Stephen King, in Stephen King novels, I always liked the characters in the novels were as scary as some of the supernatural stuff that was happening. The human nature is as scary as some of the things that were happening around. And I think The Stand, this good versus evil aspect, and you have to. It's funny because when you see that there's definitely some influence there. It's you're reaching for finding God when you can be martyred, when it's not really an easy thing to do.
Right.
And there's a tough journey, and that's what it's strangely, and it's funny. I didn't think about that when I was writing it. By the way, I realized it after I'd finished the film, which is so amazing. I go, God, this really came from the stand, and so I think those two things really influenced me. So I do want. I mean, when you see the film, the ending is purposely. There's two things I did purposely that as when I work on other projects, I don't really have them. There's a tone in there that I really wanted to make sure was palatable for a family audience to digest and really understand the characters. And there's also an ending in there that I wanted to make the ending. I wanted people to feel numb. I wanted people to walk out of the theater going, okay, we need to talk about what just took place. It's not there's not a lot of hope at the end of this movie. It's a real, it's definitely time to sit down and talk about what you just saw. And that's the thing that I really wanted I wanted the audience to feel that. It was like walking, it was what I always said when I was writing this, I always want people to walk to the parking lot talking about the film and how it affected them. And it's like jump-starting a conversation, and that's what I feel. And the recent, we've had some impact screenings with some youth ministers, and that's what has been kind of coming out. Is as the film finishes, everyone just instantly latches onto each other and has these conversations about themselves and their life and their path, and I feel good about that. I'm hoping that kind of transcends these smaller impact screenings and moves on to when we release the movie.
You mentioned St. Paul's. You don't happen to be St. Paul's near Oakland, are you?
No, it was St. Paul's. It was in Palos Verdes.
Okay. I have one of my closest friends is a Lutheran pastor there he's at St. Paul's just outside of Oakland, so that's why I was asking. So,
do you remember Casey?
Yeah, well, if that had happened, it would have been beyond Small World. It would just be like worlds collide. But so let's touch on Left Behind, because Left Behind really kind of, I think, transformed a modern interpretation of the Rapture, what people think of as what will be post-Rapture, pre-trib mentality, that kind of stuff. And were there certain aspects of this that you can say were almost like directly inspired, or at least directly connected, and something that is really, massively not connected, besides the close thing, which I think you already mentioned?
I never... frankly, are you talking about the series Left Behind?
Yeah, just only because it's so popular for other people. I'm not saying it was an inspiration for you personally. I'm just saying because people are really familiar with that, the visuals that go along with it, the details of that book. Because the series was so long, they could get into like intricate details. So when you're sitting down with a film, you only have 2 hours to tell, so you got to move pretty quick. So are there certain things that you think are very parallel to that, and something that may be very contradictory to that?
I think I would probably say that my film is a sequence in the Left Behind series, because the Left Behind, I think, becomes, and the big difference is, I would say that Left Behind's macro and micro.
Okay.
I focus on these 5 characters and the impact it's having on them, whereas I think the Left Behind series focuses on the global, what's happening in the political and the geopolitical, the backdrop, and all the kind of machinations of that. It gets really, really big. And I wanted to have it be the right at the beginning, just right up at just it's a adrenaline rush of just what happens right when the rapture happens, and where you find yourself going, where am I? What have I done? Where do I go from here? There's not a lot of places to go. Whereas I think Left Behind really kind of is a nice, it really takes place all over the global. It really gives you a sense of what's happening globally, and that's not what really I do. I just focus on our characters' point of view. That's a huge difference, and I would say, just to kind of go back, it would be, mine's micro versus their macro, and that I'm focusing really on these 5 characters and the instant impact that they go through once it happens.
I just think it's fantastic. I mean, and as a writer, I love the challenge to say, all right, well, he's micro. Let me write my own micro that fits to his universe. And I want to write a geopolitical thriller that leads into yours. It's like it's part of the whole, the multiverse sort of thing. So it's fantastic. And
I think it's more of an adrenaline rush, right?
Absolutely.
like a real run for your life, and focusing specifically, I wanted to make it about young people. I wanted to make it to focus on these characters that are just starting their lives. They have everything to live for. They have, but they really you realize they all have a secret. They all are disconnected in some way. And I think that's one of the things I loved about writing about these kids, because I felt like the audience for this, I wanted to be for, the younger kids across the country to see and kind of take inventory on where they are with their lives, because you can get so caught up in, electronics and everything else in your lives, and you forget about loving. I think that's what these kids learn in the movie.
Yeah.
They lost, they missed it.
Let me get you to just speak on it, because you were a young cat when you started out, and Donnie Darko was a film that you were able to at least be a part of. What was one of the big takeaways that you learned from that experience?
Well, Donnie Darko, that was my baby. It was the first movie that I just formed this company at Warner Brothers, and we were looking for films to finance and produce, and my friend Nancy Javonen and Drew Barrymore, they sent me the script, and and I read it and I loved it, and I was the big champion behind it, and I was the one who hired the director, Richard Kelly, who wrote the script, who no one would hire this Richard to direct the movie. It had been around for 3 years. No one would do Donnie Darko. And I think what I learned was just the value of interesting material. Mm-hmm. And I was told no at every stage of making that film, because of it being kind of a tweener. It's not really science fiction. It's not really horror. It's not really drama. I was just told that it doesn't fit into a neat little box. But I maintain this idea that I think there's something special here, and I'm gonna make this movie, and it was the first film that I was going to do under my new company, and I was very kind of optimistic, and I wouldn't let anything kind of back me down. And I think what I learned was just that tenacity wins. That if you find a great piece of material that you believe in, don't let anyone talk you out of it, because frankly, out of everything that I've produced or written or done, Donnie Darko is the hardest film that I've ever made, because I had to make it for a budget, and everyone told me no, we didn't have distribution, but it's the one film that everyone talks about.
And there's no way to even put into words what you were able to accomplish either with that. But you have Jake and Maggie. You've got Drew Barrymore, you mentioned. You got Noah Weil on there. You got just the cast is there, and then this story that has just exploded year after year, every generation. I love sharing it with my sons when they got old enough to watch it. So it's not because it was inappropriate, boys. It's because it took you till now so you could understand it. You know what I mean? Because you won't get it, but now it lives on with another generation that can appreciate what you were able to accomplish.
And that's the thing. It's like that's what frankly, that you can do popcorn movies, you can do whatever you want, but if you find a piece of material that touches you, that's interesting and provocative, and even though it's going to be a long, hard road, what better way to spend your time than trying to make a film like that, than to try to make a film that's that everyone says yes to? It's too easy, and it means nothing. So that's again, Donnie Darko is my flagship. When actors, when anybody finds out that I was part of that film, they want to talk about it. They want to be involved with me. It was not an easy movie to make. It was a first time director, and I surrounded him with a great crew, and Nancy and Drew produced it with me, and they're fantastic, and they're great people. And it was Jake's first film, and it was a wonderful experience, but not without it was very, very hard. And but I'm pleased with what we got from it. It really turned out great.
As a Christian, especially right now, I just wanted to get you to speak to, lastly, we'll wrap up with this, of we're seeing kind of an explosion. Obviously, Mark Burnett's The Bible, the TV miniseries breaks through this giant bubble, and they see this massive market of money that they can get to. And he, of course, spawned Son of God, which, based on the Bible, which is a massive success in the theater. Now we're seeing a firm step up, as well as other companies, too. I'm not trying to put pure flicks down, because obviously I love God's Not Dead as well, but we're seeing this explosion of films that are relating to this community. As a Christian, I mean, obviously that has to be exciting to you, but what are some of the things besides just this genre that you're working with, some of the other things that you would like to see?
Well, frankly, I just think that I don't want it to be exploitive. I don't want that. I don't want, the film industry is, they're the built of corporations, and corporations
Right.
want to make money, right? And so, I'll answer that question. What I don't want to see. What I don't want to see is dollar signs and exploitation.
Can I give you my analogy? You tell me if I hit this. Whenever I interviewed someone, I says, what I want to see is I want to see Rise and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. What I don't want to see is Conquest and Beneath of the Planet of the Apes. I don't want to see you cash in. I just want to see you make good stories.
Exactly right.
That's fantastic, and it sounds like you agree with me. That's what you want. I want to see good stories. I want you to stay as true as the Bible as you can. I don't want you to distort it for the sake of just entertaining yourself. Which I don't know how you felt about Noah. Maybe that's an interesting conversation as well. But
that was look. See, that's an interesting question because filmmakers are filmmakers, and filmmakers are artists. Artists have the ability to interpret, okay, and they should be able to interpret as they can to a point, as far as I'm concerned. When you're, like my interpretation of the Rapture is people falling as in instantaneously, their souls are ascending to heaven, and the only thing that you notice is that their eyes are turning white. That's an interpretation of mine. And that behind the interpretation is, boom, at a blink of an eye, the clothes fall to the ground. That's an interpretation of the same event. When it gets to the point of being, and I can't speak to Aronofsky. I read stories about how he had this story in when he was a kid, and there was his interpretation of Noah. And it's tough because on one hand, it's such a seminal story, right? It's such a seminal story, but it's such a great cinematic story. So he's a great artist. So it's hard to, that Noah to me, I don't know. That's a tough. I feel like that's just a movie. It shouldn't really be seen as almost a faith-based film.
I agree.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
That's just a movie.
Well, as a producer, why do you make that knowing that you're distorting from source material? For example, and I say that because we're going to see this with Fantastic Four, right? Half the people are freaking out because Human Torch is going to be black. So we have a hypocrisy in the industry when you change with the source material. But somehow we as Christians were expected to look a blind eye when they changed the source material from the Bible because it was only like 5 pages. And that's where I had a hard time, and people, because I think that's really where we are as Christians, right? We kind of like, well, listen, just kind of, you have to understand the source material, because you were saying with the Rapture, it's still the Rapture. You weren't changing the Rapture. You weren't turning the Rapture into something else or denying the Rapture happened. You were just interpreting how it plays out. It's like saying, there's still a flood, but Aronofsky changed who Noah was and is in Scripture, and that's where I think most Christians had a problem with it. Fair enough?
Yeah, as far as I realized, I thought that it was specific to the Noah story. It was the Ark, and that was pretty much it. That's all he did. Right?
And those great rock creatures, bro. Don't you just love those things? That was.
This is kind of off the record, which is kind of funny because I don't want to bash Darren, who's a great filmmaker, but you know what? Like, I was watching this on the plane. And Noah on the plane, which is horrible to say because I'm a director, and watching that kind of movie on the small screen is horrible. But my wife started watching it with me at the beginning, and literally she fell asleep, and she woke up right when the rock creatures were walking, and she literally looked at me, and she doesn't swear. She goes, "What the hell are those things?"
She thought you changed movies on her. Casey switched flicks just as if you were paying attention.
She was like, "What?" I go, "I don't have time to explain. Let me just keep watching."
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been great.
Carried away. At the end of the day, from that specific thing, like that was, I had read this. I don't know Darren personally, but I'd heard that it came out of this hatched at a young age. He had a specific story in mind. Who knows? But I'm not sure about the exploitive aspects of it. But I think that you have now all the studios putting through the pipelines a lot of these type of biblical, concepts, and unfortunately, those are being hatched. In conference rooms.
Yeah.
I've been in those rooms. I've been in the story meetings where, it's like, well, we need to do something to really kind of like, how do you build the ark? Well, what about rock creatures? Hey, that's a great idea. When you have people that are just for story's sake start throwing out concepts that have nothing to do with the original story and worse, thematic changes. It's like you're like, what is this film about? And so I'm worried that they're shooting a lot of these types of films that I feel like they're going to be, there's going to be kind of a backlash.
There absolutely will. I'll tell you right now, and tell your friends. I'm a Christian. I'm a writer. I will be more than happy to help sit with you folks and make sure that you don't mess it up, because the Christians will boycott.
They know, but they know they're so much smarter than you, though.
I know. Well, then that's why I won't be invited, and I'll still be here in Florida, just wondering whether or not I should recommend this film or not. So, Casey La Scala, it's been great talking and getting to know you. The Remaining, folks, comes out September the 5th. We're going to attach the trailer to this, and we will be in connection with them through this entire process, photos, new releases, teasers, trailers, all that, so you'll be able to get more updates. We're going to talk to the main character, Johnny Picard, on there as well, and stay tuned on that, because you don't want to miss The Remaining, and I'm very anxious to see the whole body of work, because I love the premise, and I think this was part of the Left Behind concept that most people are very familiar with, but it's great to see that fleshed out in such a great way. So, Casey, again, thank you so much for your time and talking with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.